The slammed door echoed the sound of a heart breaking. He watched her disappear, a silhouette against the harsh city lights. A secret they both carried, a love born in the silence of a grand estate now shattered by unspoken fears. What happens when a chance encounter binds a shy soul to a guarded heart? Subscribe to uncover the hidden depths of their story. A small, unassuming house, with a peeling coat of paint, sat on a hill overlooking the vast fields of corn that stretched to the horizon. It was here in this quiet corner of rural America that Lily lived. Her days were a predictable rhythm of work, a gentle hum of chores and responsibilities that were far too heavy for her young shoulders. The weight of her family's debts felt like a physical burden, a constant pressure that made every breath a little shallower, every smile a little more forced. Her mother, worn down by years of struggle, had a perpetually worried expression, and her father, a good man with bad luck, worked tirelessly but never seemed to get ahead. The air in their home was thick with unspoken anxieties, the fear of losing it all. Silent, ever-present guest at their dinner table. Lily was not a dreamer. She had long ago traded the fanciful notions of youth for the stark realities of their situation. Her simple life was defined by the dusty fields, the scent of fresh hay, and the unwavering love she had for her family. They were her whole world, a fragile sanctuary she was desperate to protect. Her hands, though young, were calloused from labor, her back ached from long days, but she never complained. She had an inner strength, a quiet resilience that was her most defining trait. It was this strength, born from a desperate love for her family, that pushed her to make a decision she had never thought possible. The city, with its towering skyscrapers and endless stream of strangers, was a place she only knew from television and whispered stories. It was a world of possibility and danger, a place that felt a million miles away from the familiar comfort of her small town. But the letters from the bank were getting more frequent, the threats more dire. The family farm, their inheritance, and their future was at risk. Lily knew she had to leave. She was a bird about to be pushed from the nest, not by a mother's gentle nudge, but by a storm of circumstance. The thought of leaving filled her with a profound aching sadness, but it was overshadowed by a fierce determination. She would go to the city, to a place she knew nothing about, on deciding to save the only home she'd ever known. She packed a small suitcase, a meager collection of clothes, and a few treasured photographs, each one a promise she would keep. Her journey was not one of adventure, but of sacrifice, a pilgrimage of love and duty. With a final tearful hug, she stepped onto the bus, the vast green fields of her home disappearing in the rearview mirror, replaced by the unknown concrete jungle that held both her fears and her family's only hope. The bus rattled on a noisy metal cocoon, carrying Lily away from the only world she had ever known. The familiar patchwork of green and gold fields gave way to sprawling subdivisions, then to industrial parks, and finally to the dense, unforgiving urban landscape. The city was a sensory assault. The air was thick with the smell of exhaust fumes and 1,000 different foods, the constant blare of car horns, a jarring replacement for the gentle lowing of cattle and the rustle of the wind. Lily clutched her small suitcase, a lonely island in a sea of indifferent faces. She felt smaller, more invisible than she ever had before. After a series of confusing transfers and a brief panic-filled moment of being lost, she finally arrived at the address she had been given. The building was not a bustling office, but a towering silent mansion, an island of opulence in a neighborhood of wealth. A stern-faced woman, the head housekeeper, led her through a series of grand, echoing hallways. The air inside was cool and sterile, a stark contrast to the humid summer air outside. It felt more like a museum than a home. The woman's voice was clipped and businesslike as she laid out the rules, the expectations, the strict schedule Lily was to follow. Her new employer, Mr. Alexander ***. The housekeeper only ever referred to him by his last name was a ghost. She was told she would likely never see him. He was a man who preferred solitude, a man who worked from home but rarely left his study. His life was a series of closed doors, both literal and metaphorical. Lily's world, once so expansive with open fields and endless sky, had shrunk to the confines of this mansion. Her new reality was a series of tasks, dusting the priceless furniture, polishing the marble floors, and ensuring everything was in its proper, pristine place. She was a silent servant in a silent house, a small shadow in a grand empty space. The first few days blurred into a monotonous rhythm of work, a constant reminder of the life she had left behind and the debt she was fighting to pay. She felt a profound loneliness, a deep ache for the simple comforts of her old life. But with every task she completed, with every dollar she earned, she remembered why she was there. Her family's future rested on her shoulders, and that weight, though heavy, was also her greatest source of strength. One late afternoon, a sudden torrential downpour trapped Lily inside the mansion, the rain lashing against the large silent windows. The usual quiet was replaced by the drumming of water and the distant rumble of thunder. It was during this unexpected reprieve from her duties that she found herself in the grand library, a room she had been told to simply dust and not disturb. On a low table, amidst a stack of untouched books, lay a half-finished chess game. A lonely king stood surrounded by pieces, a silent testament to a game abandoned mid-play. An old, forgotten photograph was tucked beneath the board, its corners yellowed with age. Curiosity, a feeling she had long suppressed, got the better of her. She gently slid the picture out. It was a photo of a young, smiling Alexander, his face devoid of the coldness she knew standing next to a beautiful woman. Her arm was linked through his, her laughter seemingly captured in the still image. The sight of his happy, unguarded expression was startling. It was the face of a different man, a man she had never met. The image was a stark contradiction to the reclusive, somber person he was today. As she carefully placed the photo back, she felt a pang of empathy. She was beginning to understand that the coldness wasn't a part of him, but a shield. Just as she was about to leave, she heard a sound from the doorway. It was Alexander himself standing silently, his gaze fixed on the chessboard. For the first time, Lily saw him up close. He was taller than she imagined, with a sharp, angular face and eyes that seemed to hold a profound sadness. He said nothing, his presence a quiet storm in the room. Feeling a sudden rush of nerves, she quickly apologized for being in the library and for touching the photo, her voice barely a whisper. He simply looked at her, then at the chessboard. "You play?" he asked, his voice a low, gravelly tone that held a hint of surprise. Lily, her heart still pounding, nodded. Her grandfather had taught her the game, a cherished memory from a lifetime ago. A moment of shared, unspoken understanding passed between them. In that brief exchange, something shifted. The wall between the shy maid and the mysterious CEO had its first hairline crack. That brief, unexpected exchange in the library became the first of many. A quiet ritual began to form between them. Every evening after Lily had finished her duties and the house had settled into its deep silence, Alexander would find his way to the library. He would sit at the chessboard, and Lily, hesitant at first, would join him. Their conversations were sparse, centered mostly on the game, but with each move, a new layer of his personality would reveal itself. She discovered he was a formidable opponent, strategic and patient, but he also had a dry, subtle wit that would occasionally surface, catching her off guard and eliciting a soft smile. He, in turn, began to see beyond her timid exterior. He was captivated by her quiet intelligence and the surprising depth of her understanding of the game. He saw the fire of determination in her eyes, a reflection of her unwavering will. He realized she wasn't just a quiet girl from a small town. She was a woman of strength and resilience. The silence between them, once awkward and cold, now felt comfortable and full of unspoken understanding. They were two solitary figures in a vast, empty house, finding an unlikely connection over a game of strategy and wits. One evening, after a particularly challenging game, Alexander moved a piece and, without looking at her, said, "You're not what I expected." Lily was silent, unsure how to respond. He continued, his voice a little softer than usual. "Most people I meet, they're transparent. They want something. You don't." His words were a heavy compliment, a rare glimpse into the distrust that had defined his life. Lily, looking at the board, simply replied, "I'm just trying to make a living." Her honest, uncomplicated response disarmed him. For the first time in years, Alexander felt a strange, unfamiliar emotion, a genuine curiosity about another person's life, a desire to know more about the girl who was slowly, piece by piece, dismantling the walls he had so carefully built around his heart. As weeks turned into a month, their nightly chess games became the only part of Alexander's day he looked forward to. The vast, empty house, once his refuge, now felt suffocating when Lily was not there. He found himself thinking about her throughout the day, wondering about her family in the countryside, the life she had left behind. He learned that her grandfather had been a carpenter, a gentle man, who had taught her to see the beauty in raw wood and the strategy in every choice. It was from him she had learned not just chess, but patience and the quiet dignity of hard work. One evening, a fierce storm knocked out the power. The grand mansion, with its high ceilings and expansive rooms, was plunged into darkness. Lily, guided by a small flashlight, was working her way to the kitchen to find candles when she heard a sound from Alexander's study. Hesitantly, she knocked. The door opened to reveal Alexander standing in the dim light of a flickering fireplace. He was holding a glass of scotch, the amber liquid glowing. The cold, impenetrable CEO was gone, replaced by a man who seemed vulnerable and alone. He gestured for her to come in. She entered, and the door closed behind her, shutting out the rest of the dark house. The fire cast long dancing shadows on the walls, illuminating the intricate carvings of a wooden clock on his mantelpiece. Lily found herself drawn to it. "My grandfather made one, just like this," she said softly. Her voice filled with a gentle nostalgia. Alexander followed her gaze. "It was a gift from my father," he replied, his voice barely a whisper. He told her about his father's sudden death, a tragedy that had shattered his family and forced him to grow up too quickly. As he spoke the details of his past, the stories of a young man who had to take over a sprawling business empire began to fill the quiet room. Lily listened not as an employee, but as a friend, offering a silent understanding he had not received from anyone in years. That night, amidst the darkness and the flickering firelight, the chasm between their two worlds felt a little smaller, and the fragile bond they had built over a chessboard grew into a deeper, more meaningful connection. In the weeks that followed, the fortress around Alexander's heart began to crumble. He found himself seeking out Lily's company, not just in the evening, but during the day. He'd find excuses to pass through the kitchen while she was working, offering a comment about the weather or a question about a household chore, his voice softer, less guarded. He began to see the quiet details of her life, the way she carefully tended to a wilting plant on a windowsill. Her hum as she folded laundry, the way she would get lost in thought while gazing out the window. Her simple, genuine presence was a balm to his scarred soul. One weekend, he found her sitting on the back patio, staring at the empty expanse of the garden. He walked out and sat a few feet away from her, the silence between them, now a comfortable blanket rather than a heavy shroud. "The garden used to be beautiful," he said, his gaze distant. "My mother loved a garden. After she left it, just wasn't the same." The words came out without a filter, a vulnerability he hadn't planned on revealing. Lily, without a word, began to pull at the weeds that had overtaken a small flower bed. Alexander watched her surprised. She didn't offer sympathy or platitudes. She just acted. He found himself joining her, his expensive clothes becoming dusted with soil as he worked beside her. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose beyond the cold logic of business. He wasn't the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. He was just a man helping a woman with a garden. As the sun began to set, they stood side by side looking at the small patch of cleared earth. It was a humble, almost insignificant change, but for both of them, it felt like the start of something new. They had planted a small seed of hope in the barren ground of his past. And in that shared moment, a powerful, unspoken affection took root, an undeniable connection that was beginning to blossom into love. For days, a delicate tension hung in the air, a silent acknowledgement of the growing intimacy between them. Their work in the garden had broken down the last of their professional barriers. Alexander found himself lingering in her presence, drawn to the simple, honest way she lived her life. He saw the world through her eyes, noticing the subtle changes in the sky and the new shoots of green in the once neglected flower beds. He was falling for her, a feeling both exhilarating and terrifying. But as his heart opened, so too did his old fears. The ghost of his past betrayal began to resurface. He remembered the pain of being used, of having his trust shattered by the woman he had loved. He saw her face in his dreams, a constant silent warning. The more he cared for Lily, the more his mind screamed that she, like the others, would eventually betray him. He began to pull away, his demeanor growing cold once more. He stopped joining her in the garden and no longer came to the library for their nightly chess games. One evening, Lily, her heart heavy with the sudden change, went to his study. She found him sitting at his desk, the room dark save for the glow of his computer screen. "Alexander," she began softly, "are you all right?" He didn't look up. "I'm fine, Lily," he said, his voice flat and distant. "But I think we should go back to the way things were. This isn't appropriate." His words were a physical blow. The unspoken connection they had built, the fragile trust she had started to place in him, was shattered in a single moment. "I'm your employer and you're my employee, nothing more." His cruel words were a desperate attempt to protect himself. A misguided belief that he could extinguish his feelings by hurting her first. He saw the pain in her eyes, the devastation on her face, but he was too consumed by his own fear to stop. Lily, with a broken heart and a newfound sense of betrayal, turned and walked away. The grand, silent mansion once again felt like a prison, but this time it was not the solitude that suffocated her, but the bitter knowledge that she had allowed herself to fall for a man who in the end was too afraid to love. She left the mansion the very next morning, the city once a place of hope, now a symbol of her profound heartbreak. The city once a daunting symbol of her aspirations, now felt like a cold, indifferent monster. Lily walked away from the mansion, and from Alexander the pain, a physical weight on her chest. She had come here to save her family, but in the process, she had lost a part of herself. The quiet strength that had defined her was now tinged with a new bitter hardness. She no longer had the luxury of a gentle heart. The city's harsh lessons had taught her that trust was a currency she couldn't afford to spend so easily. She found a small, cheap apartment and another job, this time at a busy diner where the work was relentless and the pay was just enough to send a portion home. Her days were a blur of waitressing, the clatter of plates, and the endless stream of customer demands, a constant distraction from her broken heart. She learned to put on a smile that didn't reach her eyes, to keep her head down, and to never let anyone get too close. Back in the mansion, Alexander was suffocating in a silence louder than any noise. The house, once a fortress, now felt like a tomb. He walked through the rooms, and all he saw were ghosts. He saw Lily tending to the garden, a small, determined figure. He saw her face reflected in the polished floors, her quiet presence in the dust-free library. The chessboard, once a source of connection and joy, now stood as a monument to his colossal mistake. He had driven away the one person who had seen him for who he was. Not for his money or his power, but for the man beneath the facade. He had been so afraid of betrayal that he had betrayed her first. The emptiness became unbearable. His fear, once a shield, was now a shackle. He remembered the sincerity in her eyes, the simple kindness she offered without expectation. He recalled the way she had listened to him that night by the fire, her silent understanding, a comfort he had never known. The cold, logical part of his mind, the part that had built his empire, told him to move on, to forget. But his heart, a muscle he had long believed to be dead, ached with a pain that was new and profound. He finally understood that he hadn't protected himself. He had punished himself. In his desperate attempt to push her away, he had also pushed away his last chance at happiness. The thought was a crushing realization, a heavy burden of regret that settled in the deep silence of his lonely mansion. He knew he had to find her, not just to apologize, but to win her back, to prove to her and to himself that he could be the man she deserved. Days bled into weeks, and weeks into months. A slow, agonizing blur for Alexander. His once immaculate mansion became a reflection of his inner turmoil, neglected and filled with a deafening silence. He tried to work to bury himself in the cold logic of finance, but his mind kept replaying the image of Lily walking away, her shoulders slumped in defeat. He knew he had to find her, not just to atone for his cruelty, but because his life had become meaningless without her. His search was not easy. The city was vast, and Lily was just one of millions. He hired private investigators, used his extensive network, and followed every lead, no matter how small. He finally found her working at a bustling diner in a less affluent part of town. He stood across the street watching her through the large window. The shy girl from the countryside was gone. The woman he saw was confident and efficient, moving with a purpose he had never seen before. Her smile, though practiced for the customers, didn't quite reach her eyes, a detail that twisted a knife in his heart. The gentle, trusting light in her gaze had been replaced by a guarded, weary look. She was beautiful, but she was different. Gathering every ounce of courage he had, he walked into the diner. The bell on the door chimed, and every head turned, but his eyes were only for her. She saw him, and for a fleeting moment, the practiced smile dropped, replaced by a flash of shock, then a wall of ice. She moved toward him, not with the grace he remembered, but with a stiff, professional air. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice devoid of emotion. Her coldness was a deliberate shield, a clear signal that the past was a closed book. Alexander, his heart pounding in his chest, truly looked at her. He realized that the woman standing before him was not the same one he had so carelessly dismissed. She was stronger, wiser, and guarded. And he knew with a certainty that shook him to his core that he would have to fight for a second chance to prove his love was genuine and his regret was real. His journey of redemption had just begun, and it would be the hardest battle of his life. Lily stood before him, a fortress of quiet defiance. Her demeanor was a shield forged in the fires of her heartbreak. "I don't think you belong here, Mr. Alexander," she said, her voice steady and cool. The use of his formal title was a deliberate and painful reminder of the chasm he had created between them. He swallowed hard the words he had rehearsed, feeling hollow and inadequate. "I know I don't. But I had to see you. I have to—" He trailed off, searching for the right words. "I was wrong about everything." She offered him a small, humorless smile. "You were wrong, Mr. Alexander. That's a new one. I thought you were always right." Her sarcasm was sharp, a weapon she hadn't possessed before. It was clear she was not the same naive girl he had cast aside. He took a step closer, his eyes pleading. "Lily, please." Just let me explain. I was scared. My past, it made me a coward. I pushed you away because I was afraid of getting hurt again. And you think hurting me was a better option? She asked, her voice cracking slightly, a single sliver of her old pain breaking through her hardened exterior. Do you know what it was like for me? To have my heart broken and then have to find a way to survive in this city all by myself. You didn't just fire me, Alexander. You broke me. The raw honesty in her words hit him harder than any accusation. He saw the tears glistening in her eyes, tears she was fighting so hard to hold back. He saw the truth of his cruelty reflected in her wounded gaze. I'm so sorry, Lily, he said, his voice raw with emotion. I'm so incredibly sorry. A sudden wave of customers came through the door, and the diner came alive with a rush of noise and orders. The moment of vulnerability was gone, swallowed by the demands of her job. Lily took a deep breath, her face a mask of professionalism once more. My shift is about to start, she said, her voice now flat and impersonal. I can't talk right now. Please leave. It was a dismissal, cold and final. Alexander, understanding that he couldn't force her, gave a slight nod. He knew he had lost this battle, but the war for her forgiveness had only just begun. He would not give up. As he walked out of the diner, he made a silent vow. He would find a way to earn back her trust, to show her that the man who had hurt her was gone, and the man who truly loved her was ready to fight for her, no matter the cost. Alexander's days became a persistent, quiet campaign to win Lily back. He no longer lurked outside the diner. Instead, he became a regular customer. He would sit in a secluded corner booth, drinking coffee he barely tasted and observing her. He watched her interact with other customers, her forced smile a constant reminder of his failure. He was patient, understanding that he couldn't force her forgiveness. He was simply present, a silent fixture in her new life, hoping his presence would over time become a quiet reminder of their past connection, not his betrayal. One rainy evening, as she was leaving her shift, a sudden gust of wind tore her umbrella from her hands, sending it tumbling down the street. She stood for a moment, drenched and defeated, a solitary figure in the pouring rain. A moment later, a car pulled up beside her. It was Alexander. The window rolled down, and he simply said, "Get in, Lily. I'll take you home." She hesitated, her entire being screaming at her to refuse. But she was exhausted and cold, and the simple kindness was too difficult to turn away. She got into the passenger seat, the silence in the car heavy and profound. As he drove through the slick city streets, he didn't try to make conversation. He simply drove, his gaze focused on the road. When they arrived at her small apartment building, he got out and walked her to the door, shielding her from the rain with his jacket. As she fumbled for her keys, he spoke, his voice low and sincere. "I didn't come to talk about us, Lily. I just wanted to make sure you got home safely." He handed her his jacket, its warmth a stark contrast to the cold rain. "Keep it," he said. "It's still cold out." And with that, he turned and walked back to his car, leaving her standing in the doorway, clutching his jacket, a small, genuine act of kindness that had nothing to do with their past and everything to do with the man he was trying to become. In that moment, a tiny seed of doubt was planted in her heart, a doubt that perhaps, just perhaps, he had truly changed. The simple act of him walking her home and giving her his jacket was a crack in the wall Lily had built around her heart. It was a gesture that spoke louder than any of his rehearsed apologies. Over the next few weeks, the small acts of kindness continued. He would leave a single flower on her car windshield, or pay for her coffee without her knowing, or send a small, discreet gift basket of her favorite snacks to her apartment with a note that simply said, "Thinking of you." There were no grand declarations, no expensive gifts, just quiet, persistent gestures that proved he was listening, that he remembered the small details about her. One Saturday afternoon, as she was leaving the diner, a beautiful hand-carved wooden birdhouse sat on the hood of her car. It was made of rich, dark wood, intricately detailed, a tiny, perfect replica of the clock on his mantelpiece. A small, handwritten note was tucked inside. "My father made me the clock. My grandfather taught me to see the beauty in wood. He would have wanted me to make this for you." The words hit her with a powerful wave of emotion. He was showing her, not just telling her, that he was willing to connect with her past, to honor the memories she held so dear. This was not the cold, distant CEO she had known. This was a man trying to heal his own wounds by mending hers. She found herself at the mansion that evening, standing on the same grand porch she had left months ago. She held the birdhouse in her hands, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. He opened the door, his eyes wide with surprise. "Lily," he said, his voice soft with a tremor she had never heard before. She looked at him, her gaze traveling from his face to the birdhouse in her hands. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice a whisper. "Thank you." He stepped aside and let her in. The house was no longer the sterile, silent place she remembered. There were plants on the windowsills, books scattered on tables, and the faint scent of something cooking in the kitchen. It was alive in a way it never had been before. He led her to the library, to the same chessboard that had been the start of it all. He sat down and gestured to the other side. "Do you want to play?" he asked, his eyes filled with a vulnerability and a genuine hope that she couldn't ignore. Lily looked at him, at the man who had hurt her so deeply, and at the man who was now trying so hard to heal her. She sat down across from him, her heart making a choice that her mind was still trying to understand. "I'll play," she said. And for the first time in months, her smile was real. For Lily, sitting across from Alexander at the chessboard felt like coming home. The tension was gone, replaced by a fragile peace. They didn't talk about the past or the pain he had caused. They simply played the click of the pieces on the board, a familiar, comforting sound. As the game went on, she noticed subtle changes in him. He was no longer the ruthless, cold player he once was. He was more thoughtful, more patient. And he watched her not just as an opponent, but with an earnestness that melted the last of her defenses. When the game ended, a quiet calm settled over them. Lily looked up from the board, and their eyes met. "Alexander," she said softly. What was it about her? The woman from the photograph. The question had been on her mind for months. She needed to understand the ghosts that haunted him. He sighed a deep, heavy exhalation of a man holding a burden for too long. He began to speak, his voice low and raw, with a pain that was still fresh. He told her about Sarah, his first love, the woman who had betrayed him for his wealth, leaving him for a rival businessman. He spoke of the emotional devastation, the profound loss of trust that had hardened him and made him build the wall she had found so impenetrable. "I thought you were like her," he admitted, his voice full of shame. "I saw a country girl, innocent and kind, and I convinced myself it was all an act. I was so afraid of being hurt again. I pushed away the only person who had ever seen me for who I was." Lily listened, a wave of empathy washing over her. She finally understood the source of his cruelty. It wasn't a flaw in his character, but a deep, festering wound from a past betrayal. She reached across the chessboard and gently placed her hand on his. Her touch was a balm, a quiet offer of forgiveness and understanding. "I'm not Sarah, Alexander," she said, her voice filled with a profound tenderness. "And you're not the same man who was betrayed all those years ago. We're both different now." In that moment, the last of his walls crumbled. He took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers, and for the first time, he allowed himself to fully feel the love he had for her. A love that was born not out of convenience or a shared history, but from a mutual understanding of pain loss and the long, difficult journey of healing. He had let go of his past, and she had finally forgiven him. Their new beginning wasn't a sudden fairy tale ending, but a quiet, hard-won victory of two souls finding their way back to each other, ready to build a future on a foundation of honesty, trust, and a love that had survived the impossible. After Lily's confession and Alexander's raw admission of his past, a new chapter began for them. The mansion, once a symbol of his solitude, transformed into a home. They spent their days filling the empty spaces, not with expensive furniture, but with the simple joys of a shared life. They replanted the garden together, their hands in the dirt, their laughter echoing through the once silent halls. They cooked meals in the kitchen, Lily teaching him the simple, hearty recipes of her countryside upbringing, while he taught her about the complex flavors of the world he had traveled. Their evenings were no longer defined by a tense chess game, but by comfortable silences and meaningful conversations. Alexander finally allowed himself to be the man he had been before his heartbreak, caring, humorous, and full of a quiet passion for life. And Lily, no longer the timid country girl, blossomed into a confident, radiant woman. She found joy in their shared life, and her love for Alexander was a powerful force, one that had the ability to heal old wounds and build a new future. One night, as they were sitting by the fireplace, the same one where he had first begun to open up to her, Alexander took her hand. "Lily," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I spent so long being afraid of love, afraid of losing everything. But in pushing you away, I lost the one thing that truly mattered. You taught me that love isn't a weakness, it's a strength. It's what makes life worth living." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside, nestled on a bed of white silk, was a simple, elegant ring with a single brilliant diamond. "Marry me, Lily. Let's build a future together, a future based on honesty and a love that has survived the worst and become stronger because of it." Tears streamed down Lily's face. She looked at him, at the man who had caused her so much pain and had since fought so hard to win her heart back. She saw the genuine love and profound regret in his eyes. She saw a future full of hope, not fear. "Yes," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Alexander. 1,000 times yes." Their journey had been long and difficult, filled with heartbreak and misunderstanding. But in the end, they had found their way back to each other, their two souls once broken, now whole, ready to start a new beginning together. As Lily said yes, Alexander's relief was palpable. He slid the ring onto her finger, its cold metal a stark contrast to the warmth of her hand. The stone caught the light of the fire, sparkling like a captured star. It was not a token of his wealth, but a symbol of a promise he intended to keep forever. He kissed her, then, a kiss filled with all the regret of his past and all the hope for their future. It was a promise of a new life, a new beginning together. Their love story wasn't a fairy tale. It was a testament to the resilience of the human heart, a story of two people who had been broken and found a way to heal each other. They had both learned hard lessons. Alexander had learned that true love required vulnerability and courage, not walls and fear. Lily had learned that forgiveness was a gift she gave not just to him, but also to herself, freeing her from the bitterness of the past. They didn't rush into a wedding. Instead, they took their time building their future on a foundation of honesty and trust. They spent months traveling, seeing the world through each other's eyes, visiting the quiet countryside where Lily grew up, and the bustling cities Alexander had built his empire in. They learned about each other's worlds, bridging the gap between them with a love that had grown stronger through adversity. The final chapter of their story was not about a grand wedding or a lavish celebration, but about the quiet, ordinary moments they shared. It was about Alexander finally learning to relax, to laugh freely, and to trust that the good things in life were not always a prelude to pain. It was about Lily finding her voice a confident and strong voice that was no longer silenced by fear. Their love was a beautiful, imperfect masterpiece, a story of how two people from two different worlds, through a series of betrayals, mistakes, and forgiveness, found a way to change not just each other's hearts, but their entire worlds forever. This story is a powerful exploration of forgiveness, redemption, and the transformative power of love. It teaches us that everyone carries a past, and our deepest fears can often lead us to hurt the very people we care about. The central message is that true strength lies not in building walls to protect ourselves, but in having the courage to tear them down and embrace vulnerability. For the audience, the value of this story lies in its authentic portrayal of a journey toward healing. It serves as a reminder that forgiveness is not just for the person who wronged you, but for yourself, and that a second chance is a gift that can change a life forever. It's a story about finding love in the most unexpected places and realizing that the most beautiful connections are often born from a shared understanding of pain and a mutual commitment to growth.